Welcome to the Gentleman's Talk, where the podcast talks about a man's battle with mental health, his personal experiences, and his journey to be a better soul. Hosted by James Dean Littlejohn.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Gentleman's Talk. I'm doing something a little bit different today. I'm talking on a video podcast as well as my live podcast. To try and reach a bigger audience, try and get a bigger footprint, because I enjoy this, I love this, and I want to be able to reach a wider field, get more people involved, listen to more stories and understand more stories. And hopefully by the videos I get you to see the face behind the voice that's been talking to you for the last 8 months, if you're listening on the video podcast on YouTube, on the Gentleman's Talk, or if you're on the podcast, as I record, then, jump onto the video if you want to see the crazy fool behind the voice that's been talking to you with my dulcet tones. Let me introduce myself again. So, I say again because I've introduced myself on my podcast before, but I want to give my new video, my video listeners, or video watchers, should I say, just a chance to understand who I am, what I'm about, and why I'm talking about mental health. It all stems really from about 14 years ago. So my name's James Littlejohn. James Dean Littlejohn. Yes, that is James Dean, the rebel without cause. My dad and mum were a bit crazy. And yes, Littlejohn as in Robin Hood. Although if you look back, I think it's called John Little, but hey, we're not going to get into history on this one. And basically, almost 14 years ago to about 11 years ago, between that period, I had 3 head-on collisions. Not my fault, but I used to commute to work, so I had no choice. I had to jump back on the horse. And so to speak, that was the beginning or the demise of my mental health. And it went unnoticed for around about 5 or 6 years. And it's kind of developed, and it developed into bigger problems. It developed into anxiety, PTSD. I was finally diagnosed with severe PTSD, permanent, and anxiety and depression. So it's been a tough battle. And to put it bluntly, the reason I'm here is a mixture of reasons, really. About October time last year, I did try to do something similar. So I tried to do video podcasts. What I did was I was on holiday. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel happy with myself. But I'd had enough of feeling low. And I wanted to know how to make myself happy. And I just didn't know how to do that. And ultimately, I was sat on holiday. And I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about my dog. Or my dogs, should I say. And I was thinking about how much they made me happy and how much I missed them. So I decided last year that I would chuck myself out there and do a live video podcasts to ask for a GoFundMe for not a silly amount, but a very silly amount, $750,000, because I was ambitious. I just wanted the money. I knew it'd be successful. I had ideas coming out my head with what I was going to do, environmental sustainability. I was going to give back to charity. I was going to help other organisations. And ultimately, that was my goal. My goal was to just sell myself as a person to donate to. Unfortunately, around about November time, I got some bad news that people were talking about my video podcasts and my mental health instability as a problem. And it's started to potentially impact my job. So I didn't feel comfortable with that. And I got told from basically an inside source that they knew about it. And they were like, "Are you doing these?" And I sort of said yes. And they went, "Is it about your mental health? Is there anything you want to tell us?" And I was ambitious. I wanted to get promoted. So ultimately, I had to stop doing that. Now, that led to the demise even further, because I'd done something, or I'd found something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed talking about mental health. I enjoyed talking about my journey, what I've had to endure. But ultimately, not just that from a selfish perspective, but more how I want to come out the better side, or the other side, and deal with my mental health and be a better person. So unfortunately, when I found out the bad news, that led to my 3rd suicide attempt. And that was a tough pill to swallow, excuse the pun but there was no pun intended, but I'd say I said it, but it was difficult to deal with. And when I was sat just before Christmas on the top of a hill around my local area where I live, and I'd woken up, I'd walked because I didn't want to be in the house anymore, I didn't want to be around anybody, I didn't know what I wanted, I didn't know who I wanted to be, I didn't know where I wanted to be, I didn't know what I wanted to do, I didn't know my purpose. Can you imagine that draining my brain? And that's what it was. And it was 2:00 on a early morning when I went, I can't do this anymore, I just don't want to be here. And I went up and I took a cocktail, so to speak, of drugs to not be here anymore. And I had an epiphany that this wasn't the right thing to do for me. And I think it was more of a cry for help for me, because I had vodka with me, and I threw the tablets back up and ultimately was a bit drowsy for a couple of days and decided that would be, I needed to sort this out. I needed to grasp it. I needed to get hold of it. And at the same time, I knew there was an element of me that enjoyed doing the podcasts. I enjoyed talking about my mental health and trying to help other people. I felt that was where I needed to come from. So I decided in January, not as a New Year's resolution, none of that tripe, excuse me, but I do think it's tripe. This was genuine. This was like I wanted to change my life. And I didn't know how to do it, but what I did know is I enjoyed talking about it and I enjoyed engaging with other people. So I started a podcast, The Gentleman's Talk, and that's where this podcast has come from, and it's just grown into what I wanted to be. So I jumped onto TikTok doing little tiny videos, and I've jumped onto YouTube now to do videos on YouTube and mixture it up so I get a visual and an audio representation of what I want to talk about. And in January, I decided to do that. I decided to grab the bull by the horns and talk about my mental health and talk about ADHD, which I was recently diagnosed with as an adult, I'm learning a lot about that. So you'll hear about that in my journey. PTSD, permanent for the rest of my life, and how I'm dealing with that. And ultimately, depression and anxiety and the crippling effects that's had on me. And I've spoke about this in almost 100 hours on my podcasts of tips, tricks, ways that I've dealt with it, ways that you can deal with it, and ways that you can hopefully manage it and grasp it. So, and that's where this was born. This is where this whole journey has become. I've come from having car crashes that weren't my fault, that developed into being undiagnosed, that then grew into finally being diagnosed with PTSD after almost 6 years of struggling, to 38 therapy sessions with a cognitive behaviour therapist, EMDR training, so that was almost like a hypnosis type thing they used for very traumatic experiences. It failed on me dramatically. They actually wrote it on my report that I can't physically do EMDR ever again because it takes me back to a horrible place. And ultimately led to this, going, the only way I think I'm going to do this and better myself and become a better father, husband and friend is by dealing with this myself, because I've physically watched the demise of my relationships, my friendships, parents. I've had an absolute ordeal of the way that I've dealt with things. And I wanted to grab that. I wanted to talk about it because, as I said to you in some of my podcasts, and as I'm reiterating here, when I was sat on that, ultimately on that hill at 2:00 in the morning, the only thing I could think about was I didn't know who to turn to. Now, that wasn't because I didn't know who to turn to in the sense of I didn't have the people around me, because I did. I had friends, I had family, I had a best friend. We've been friends now almost 28 years. He's on my wall as a caricature. We have many memories together, but because he didn't really know the extent of my mental health, I didn't feel comfortable saying where I'd got to. I felt embarrassed. I almost felt I didn't want to say anything. And even though I've got a brother who's very similar in his everything, we almost could be twins, and I've got a very close father. So that ultimately led to me thinking, well, if I can't talk to them, why can't I talk to them? And ultimate seems to be the word of the day for me. But the main reason that didn't resonate, or that resonated with me and I didn't feel right, was because why couldn't I talk to them And ultimately that's because men are trained and taught to just get on with it. And what I'd done for the last 11 years is I'd just got on with it. I just turned my head into work. Work became my primary focus. I became the model employee, if you like. But it was only until the end, until this final time in December 2021, when I went, this is enough, I can't do this anymore, that I said I need to change. And like I said, this gave me purpose. This is the podcast. This is me talking, engaging with other people with other similar problems. I've met loads of people, and that's transpired into actually finding 2 other additional very good friends of mine, which are absolutely amazing. So I grew into understanding, and it was all on the back of mental health, talking about mental health. I think as I became more open about my mental health, people felt that they could trust me and relate with me. And I've enjoyed that. That's almost given me my purpose. It's almost made me feel comfortable. Because I'm sat here now going, although I'm uncomfortable doing this video for a little while, because I'm not kind of used to it. I haven't set the ambiance of the room like I used to do. But it's a start, isn't it? It's a starting point. It's a starting block. It's you have to have a starting point to better yourself. And although I better myself in my podcast, doing a video podcast and getting everything right is going to take me a while to understand the dynamics of how it looks. I mean, I know for a fact now that I'm worried about the reflection of my glasses, and these are the type of things when really I should just be worried about the content, but that's my overthinking. And that is ultimately where this has come from. This has stemmed from car crashes, not being able to talk, blocking myself up and just getting on with it. And that was the demise ultimately of my mental health. So I wanted to challenge that, and I wanted to better myself from that. And that was easily achievable when I knew what to do and what I found fun, what I found exciting. And what I found fun and exciting was talking openly about this, because nobody does. Men are inherently bad for not talking about their mental health and letting the demise of their mental health just dictate who they are and plan their day. You can almost see when a man's not quite comfortable or stressed or has really, really down days because of the way that they come across, quite aggressive. And that's certainly what I did. I was very aggressive. I was very overpowering and ultimately not a nice person. I was a nice person in my hearts of heart, but the depression led to that. The depression led to me being a person I wasn't anymore. And the only way that I could see that there was a way out from that was to not be here anymore, was to just end it, just slowly go. It's crazy how your mind thinks that that's the only way you can go. And the statistics are that high for male suicides that is the problem, because we don't know where to go. We don't talk about it. We think it's a sign of weakness. And I've even seen on videos recently that people are saying that if you talk about your mental health, you're weak. You need to be a man. You need to shut that down. You need to be a barbarian. Now, I'm not exactly small in stature. So what does that make me then? Just a large, weak man, does it? No, because I'd rather be weak and talk about my mental health and better my mental health than I would sit there and ignore my mental health. Because I've done that for 11 years. I've ignored my mental health and I've been a horrible person. As I've said to you, I've lost relationships, friendships. I've lost partnerships with my fathers and mum. And it's taken me the best part of 18 months to try and rebuild that. And that's what this journey is about. It's about nurturing that and talking about mental health and being open and honest. And something as simple as, I say simple in the loosest of terms, but something as every day as a car crash has ultimately led to me changing characters, being a completely different person, having anxiety, which I never had. I never had an anxiety attack. I'd never sit there and wouldn't want to go places. But I have. I've ultimately given so much up because of mental health. But I'm here to change that, and that's what this journey's about. That's why I'm talking on podcasts and video podcasts, because I want to change the mindset of the people. I want men to understand that they can talk, and it's not a sign of weakness. You can still talk about your mental health and go to the boxing ring and smack 7 shades of shit out of somebody. It doesn't really matter. You can still talk about your mental health and jump into an F1 car and do ridiculous speeds. It doesn't make you a weaker person. It doesn't make you less of a man by talking about your mental health. What it does is it gets you in tune with yourself. It gets you in tune with your personality. It gets you in tune with what makes you work and what makes you tick. I have been told on many occasions that I love the sound of my voice. So what better way to try and give myself purpose than to talk about mental health, something I'm so passionate about, because I've endured the very, very bottom of it. The only bit I haven't felt is the final bit, because I haven't let myself get to that point. I've tried to remain strong. And this last 7 months, when I started this journey and I built this podcast and I'm building this almost a brand, I'd like to call it, very ambitious of me to say that, but the Gentleman's Talk, I enjoy that. I enjoy the prospect of it. I enjoy the fact that here I am talking about my mental health. I'm a 41-year-old father of 3 daughters and husband to a wife. I have 3 dogs. So I'm your normal sort of person, you would say. However, I'm not that normal, because I deal with a lot of pain, anxiety. I deal with very, very, very low states that cripple me and have crippled me for almost 11 years. And you can see me on Facebook, because at the same time you only ever post the best parts of your life on Facebook. And from the outside in, as I've said to you before, it looks like I've got everything. I've got a nice motorbike. But what they don't realise is the nice motorbike was bought from the compensation money from the last car crash that almost killed me. So that was a treat. However, what you don't realise is that motorbike has done in 2 years 500 miles, because I reluctantly get on it, but I wanted to try and get on it. But I went and bought my dream bike and I can't ride it because my back's crippled and my mind's crippled. Now, there'll be people out there saying, just man up and get on with it. Trust me, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. You'll understand that about me. You'll hear that in my journey. On my previous podcast, like I said, I've done almost 100 hours on my podcast, The Gentleman's Talk. So jump on there and you'll hear an absolute world of explanations and motivational stuff. But here I am trying to redo it, so to speak, but in a bit more of a detailed format. And give you some good stories. I've been very, very fortunate to be surrounded by people that are willing to be open and honest with me. So I've had some good stories, and I've had people share things with me, which has made me have purpose. Now, that's one of the biggest points of this whole journey, this whole thing, this whole mental health, talking about it. I'm not doing it because I want to be famous. I'm not doing it because I want to be on the next bloody breakfast show or something. No, not at all. I'm doing this because I want to help people, because I've endured absolute world of pain. I've endured, like I said, losing a lot of things. And from the outside in, I look like I've got it all, but it's not the case. The case is you can have everything on the outside, but if your mind isn't right, it means nothing. So that's my journey, really, and that's just a little brief explanation of where I've come to. And in the last 7, almost 8 months of doing this, I've had ups, I've had downs, I've had some big downs, and you'll hear that. But I'm willing to embrace those downs, and I want to talk on those down days so you can see this type of things that men go through. This is what is so passionate about me, is I want people to understand that men are human beings. We aren't robots. We're not designed to just man up. We do suffer. And you can be the big burliest man or the shortest, skinniest man and still have the same problems that we all face. The inherent issue is that women just look after it in a better way. They look after each other in a better way. They openly talk to each other in a better way. They buy each other flowers and chocolates and ice cream. Not saying I want flowers. No, I do want flowers, chocolate and ice cream. But at the same time, they look after each other. When you have a breakup, they'll go around and they'll sort it out. When you've had a bad day, they'll go out with a bottle of wine and some flowers or some chocolates and talk about it. Men don't do that. We go home, we have our tea, we bury our head in the sand, we have a drink, and then we go to sleep. And then we hope the next day is going to be a different day. And if it isn't, we think, shit, it's not a different day, it's the same day. And it rolls on until you all of a sudden realise that every day is the same day and you're not dealing with things. So here I am to change that. to try and change it anyway, to certainly be one of the many people that are trying to change that. I'm not an individual. There is many men, and I commend all of them for talking about mental health. And the more that we talk about it, the more people talk about it, the more we'll understand it, the more we'll nurture each other, and the more we become a more harmonious male and female, whatever gender you may be, you'll be more harmonious in your own self. And that starts with looking at yourself. And that's what I did. In January last year, I stopped. I went, I can't do this anymore. I can't get to the point where I'm trying to recover from doing something as silly as trying to let myself go and trying to give up. I didn't want to give up because I didn't want to be one of those very high statistics. I wanted to be something different. I wanted to make a difference. But I needed purpose. And I got my purpose when I spoke on this. And I enjoy talking about this because I don't think that we talk about it enough. And ultimately, see, I told you ultimately is my word of the day. But ultimately, that is what's caused a lot of my heartache over the years. It's caused a lot of loss over the years. And I'm rebuilding myself to rebuild those relationships and understand that the purpose in life is, we don't need a purpose in life. The purpose in life is to enjoy it. We are such a ridiculously small percentage of the chance of you being here as the entity that you are. But we always seem to want more. We seem to chase more. We seem to want more all the time. We're not so much as satisfied with our own I've got 4 walls and a family. We want more. We want to go on holidays. We want cars and motorbikes. We want everything. Sex is chucked around everywhere. And I've noticed recently that men now seem to be on this same cycle as women, where we're almost body shamed if you're a normal person, if you've not got a six-pack. So we're feeling a lot of similar things to what females feel and what they get, body shamed in magazines, etc. But except they've embraced it. They've said, no, we're going to change the way that the world thinks. Whereas men, again, we've stopped talking. We've just gone, okay, well, I'll try and aspire to that. If I don't aspire to that, then I'm going to just get dumped and move on or whatever. I'm not going to conform to society because I can't. And we end up losing on another battle that we've tried to face that we end up losing. But what I'm here to do is change all of that. Or try to change all of that in the best of my abilities. Understand myself, talk about myself, understand what I've gone through and how I've dealt with it. And it sort of leads me in then nicely into one of the biggest topics that I think that I want to talk about is overthinking. Now, overthinking is one of the biggest things or the biggest problems, I think, inherently with everybody. When you overthink a situation, it distorts your perception of the outcome massively. It changes your perception because you're overthinking everything. Now, overthinking comes with a positive and a negative. And if you're listening to this and maybe you've got mental health concerns, and you're thinking, actually, I'm in a bit of an overthinker and I've perked my ears up and I'm going to take a listen, then tuck in because I'm going to get stuck in. And I've spoke about this as a broad spectrum, but I want to give it a little bit more detail because there's 2 aspects to overthinking. There's some positives and there's some negatives. And sorry, let me just pull that back a little bit to get a bit more light. I'll talk about the negatives first because I think that that's a good way to do it because you can hopefully relate to the negatives. Now, overthinking, like I said, distorts your perception. You overthink a situation. You look at scenarios and you think the worst straight away. I know you do. I do. That's what I do. It's why if I receive an email from a boss, it might be in a certain context and I'll overthink it. And to give you a scenario or something like that, I was recently given an email from my boss asking me to not thank her for doing her job. She said, it's my job, you don't need to thank me every time. But now I'm a kind person, so I took that as a little bit of a negative, and I overthought that situation, and it took me a long time to get over that, about a good 2 or 3 days, because I kept churning over. Fortunately, it was in the weekend, because I probably would have emailed her and asked her for an explanation. But that's just a little typical scenario where I've spoke about my mental health, and ultimately that was the demise of it in that situation. Again, I stressed myself out. I overthought the situation. I've done it with text messages. Text messages will come through and I'll overthink the text message. And I'll be like, oh, well, maybe they mean this, maybe they mean that. And that's really why I hate text messages, because if you're an overthinker, text messages or emails can be horrible, absolutely debilitating. And overthinking a situation can ultimately lead to relationship failure, friendship failure. You might look at your friend and go, he's not invited me, but he's gone somewhere. Why hasn't he invited me? Is it, well, you'll go into this whole whirlwind of scenarios of why you think he's shut you down. But in actual fact, there might just be a simple explanation that he was out with a friend because he wanted to go out with that friend and we don't get on. Or there could be something so simple, but you've overthought the situation. Now, I digress a little bit here, so I apologise. I do tend to do that a little bit. I do tend to digress a little bit. But what you need to remember is overthinking is one of the hardest things for me to grasp. So you have to remember to take your time. And to offer you a little bit of sort of insight into how I've now started dealing with those situations is if someone sends me a text message or an email, I'll look at how I can deal with that situation, and I'll look and say, okay, well, I've reacted intensely there, and that's upset me. So what I tend to do is respond, but not send the actual response. I tend to stick it in drafts, and then I'll go away. I'll come back and I'll go away, even if it's just for a brief 5 minutes, to take a break, take a 5-minute break, and just actually relax. And then what I tend to do is come back to the email and go, whew, or the text message, that's a bit harsh. It's a bit harsh. Because I'm an emotional thinker and I'm an emotionally reactive person. So you have to remember that. You have to be cautious if you're an overthinker. But one of the other things, another positive that is hugely amazing, I think, and this is where I've looked at overthinking, is if you know there's a person, or if you know you're an overthinker, then you know for a fact that you've thought about every single scenario. You've thought about every single way that could come out, that every single outcome, every single difficulty. You've thought about whether you can trust that person, whether you like that person, why don't you trust that person. You've overthought every single sort of situation. Has that person sent you the email because it was intended in this light? Was it intended in that light? There's a mixture of ways that you look at everything. So there's a huge positivity to being an overthinker. And that positivity comes with, I'm just trying to get myself comfortable. That positivity comes with the fact that you've overthought every situation, even though that has inherently probably caused you a lot of stress. So one of the things I did, because I'm an overthinker, and the negatives and the positives are only something I can talk about now, because for the last 11 years, I've sent emails out with a lot of passion. And that was when I realised I was a big overthinker. And what I tended to do now is, like I said, I tend to develop ways to not overthink the situation. I tend to try and slow myself down physically and mentally, actually try my hardest. Now, you can understand, if you know anything about ADHD as well, that is an even harder thing to do, because you want to react quite quickly. So when you're mixed with ADHD, PTSD and anxiety, it's a ball of craziness in your head that you're trying to deal with. And even though I'm medicated, and even though I take paroxetine, which is 50 milligram, I'm not ashamed to say it, it's a functioning tablet, is the highest that you can get, but it helps me function. I've been on that for 4 years. I'm on an anti-anxiety tablet, which, forgive me, I don't know what that is. I can't remember. I'm on a olanzapine, I think it's called, and I'm on gabapentin. So these are drugs that make me function, but come with their own problems, their own risks. Now, like I said, the risk to me is the fact that, my paroxetine makes me overheat, so I'm a very hot person. It also makes me put on weight because it slows my metabolism down. That's the anti-anxiety tablet. It slows my metabolism down even more. So you can imagine I'm putting on weight, so I'm getting anxiety about my weight. So these tablets that are incorporated into my life to make me better, to make me function, give me the ability to actually function on a daily basis, come with such bad side effects that they make everything worse. But I'm willing to take those because they make me function. They make me a bearable person. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to better myself, and that's where this whole thing comes in, and that's when I'm trying to grasp. So the overthinking situation is, how do I stop myself from overthinking? Well, I can't stop myself from overthinking, but what I can do is control it. I can take my time. I can pull myself away from situations and look at the situation and go, okay, take a step back. You've reacted to that emotionally. You know you have, because you've got your adrenaline racing. Someone's upset you. Someone's made you mad. You need to take yourself out of it. And that was to give you a real life scenario of how important it is. So what I've done, I won't digress too much, but I'll give you a reason why it's important. So what I did is I've grasped it so I control it. And then what I've also done is I've spoken to the very closest of people, including colleagues, as in I've only known my new colleagues 3 months, and already I've gone straight in and gone, guys, I want to lay it on the line with you. This is what I suffer from. Not to put a label on it. I don't want to be treated any differently, but if I react slightly differently in a situation, please look at it as the situation it is, and look at me with a little bit more empathy, and maybe try and help me, because I'm not stupid. I'm far from it. But at the same time, I might react a more emotional way rather than a professional way. So I have to be conscious of all this, especially in my role. So I've opened up and I spoke about them. I said, I'm an overthinker. I do overthink situations. So if you send me something and there's a negativity, even like today, for instance, I was sent a text message from my two colleagues and they were talking to each other and I wasn't included in the conversation. Now, it wasn't really because it was nothing to do with me, and I know that now. But at the time, because I wasn't being mentioned or being incorporated into it, it made me upset, because I was like, they not want to talk to me anymore. But that's the overthinking side of things. And I had anxiety about that, to the point where I had to put my phone down, because I was like, I don't want to deal with this. So to overthink, you need to control, because if you don't control, it will get hold of you. And that is where everything started to crumble away, because I would overthink a situation and I would react emotionally to that situation, and I would then go, right, I don't like you because you've done this, and they go, whoa, fucking hell, mate, I didn't do anything. It wasn't meant any harm by that. But because I wasn't honest about myself, because I wasn't open, and I didn't tell people that were close to me that would have felt this, it led to them thinking I was an arsehole. Basically, that's the easiest way to deal with it. They thought, who the fuck is this guy? He's a fucking crazy loon. He's just like off his head. He don't give a shit. No, I do give a shit, actually. I'm completely the opposite. I absolutely give a shit. I like to give a shit. But I overthink. And then I get anxiety about the overthinking. But what I have done is, by nurturing the fact that I overthink and speaking to the people that will deal with me on a regular basis, they understand me, because they go, okay, well, maybe that's just because of that. Now, I'm not asking them, like I said, I don't want empathy. I don't want people to tiptoe around me. But I want people to understand that I have a mental health condition. It's not visible. You don't see it. From the outside in, I'm just this normal guy, slightly rotund because of looks like I eat more. It's not. It's just because I've got a really slow metabolism. I actually eat hardly anything, really, in comparison to what I used to eat before I was on the medication. So everything comes with its own troubles, but it's actually alleviated a lot of the pressure by actually being open with people and giving them the ability to understand where I come from, and saying, actually, I'm a bit of an overthinker. This is the situation with this. And what they then do is they then take, I don't want them to tiptoe, but I want them to have a little bit of empathy for me and just go, okay, that's probably, and I mean in a professional context, because at the end of the day, if I react slightly emotionally, I want people to help me. If I'm in an emotional situation that they can see that I'm like that, they'll take me out of the situation. And it's not saying I can't control it, but what you don't understand is when your brain's there, when you have a mental health condition such as PTSD or permanent, which is permanent, and ADHD, that's just whirlwind of craziness in your mind. And I'm learning. Like I say, I was only diagnosed with ADHD 3 months ago. So I'm still learning massively about this. It's a huge, huge thing. And it's giving me a lot of focus, because I actually have the ability to understand why I overthink and read situations. And one of the things that came back to me was my friend, actually, a very good friend of mine, turned around to me and said, do you know, there's another positive to the fact that you're an overthinker, and he exploits it. And he openly said, I exploit it, actually. I said, why? He said, how do you mean? He said, because what I will do is I will ask you a scenario. I'll ask you a question and I'll put it in a scenario. And you will think about every single detail. And he learnt that very quickly when we were doing site visits, and I would look and go, okay, well, what if this happens? And someone comes in, that's not likely going to happen. And I say, well, maybe it won't, but, look at Grenfell, for instance, and this is because I deal with health and safety. Look at Grenfell. No one thought that was going to catch fire and people were going to die, but here we are now, just past the anniversary of it. So anything can happen. But what an overthinker tends to do is think about every single scenario. And I'll think about that in friendships, in relationships. I will have already, if you're a friend of mine, I would have already looked at every detail about you, and I will be constantly analysing you. Now, that's not through hatred. That's not through, oh God, fucking hell, I'm going to avoid him now, he's been a bit of a dick. It's just the fact that I'll understand them more. And that's what I've sort of failed to do with myself, really. I failed to understand myself, and I just helped other people. So if you're an overthinker, then absolutely don't worry about it. What you just need to do is grasp the fact that you are an overthinker and control it. And that's what I'm learning to do. And along this whole journey, this whole mental health journey, I'm trying all sorts. So I'm learning to control the overthinking. I'm controlling the emotional side of things. I'm trying to control the anxiety. I'm trying to get out there a bit more. I'm just trying everything. I'm taking up a new hobby. I'm removing an old hobby that I used to do. I used to do wakeboarding. Realise now I can't do it because of my back. So what I've done is I moved across to a more manageable sport, which is golf. So because I need to keep my mind occupied, I need to keep myself focused on something. And that's where this podcast came in. And the Gentleman's Talk was just I absolutely loved it. I've done it off my own back. I've not relied on anyone else to help me, which is where before what I would sit and do was chuck ideas out and go, let's do this, this, and this. And then no one would come along and I'd be like, what do you mean? I'm so fucking... And they'd be like, no, mate, because you're just going through one of your crazy moments. And I'd be like, maybe. But at the same time, this is the longest thing I've stuck to. And I've stuck to this for 8 months. Why? Because I actually enjoy it. Yes, there's days where I don't want to post. Yes, there's days where I overthink my own podcast. I overthink, are people listening to us? I look at stats. I overthink, are no one listening to us? I've had no feedback from my friends, and I used to overthink about that. Why are they not telling me that I'm doing a good job? Until it got to the point recently where I was like, just do it because you enjoy doing it, mate. Just do a podcast because you enjoy talking. That's what you need. If one of your friends come along and say, oh, I listened to the one the other day, mate, that was pretty spot on. Or they say, oh, like I've had a bit of feedback from one of my friends who said, your intro tune was playing across the whole barrel of it, through the whole episode. And I was like, oh shit. So I have to be conscious of that. So, but at the same time, do this because I want to do it, not for other people. If I'm helping other people along the way, that just makes me happy. That's the happiness. That's where I get the happiness, because I want to help other people. And trust me, I've endured a lot. There's a lot you're going to understand in this journey. And some of that stuff you'll grasp on my podcast on Podbean. Jump on or on Spotify and or all platforms. Jump on and have a listen, because I speak about all sorts. And like I said, overthinking is such a big thing for me at the moment, because I'm trying to grasp it. It's something I'm trying to constantly control. And I'm trying to bring the overthinking situation down. And for me, that is the hardest bit, is understanding it, analysing what the problem is. So when I deal with a certain situation, I go, okay, so I have anxiety about going out, or I have anxiety about a situation, and I constantly reflect on everything now. And that's for another story. But the overthinking aspect, I can't stop. I just seem to react quite quickly to things. So what I am doing is grasping it. I'm just going, no, okay, so keep constantly. You need to keep constantly being regular at managing it. You have to be routine. And I'll talk about this in future podcasts about how long it takes. But ultimately, it's just getting out there and talking about it. So if you're an overthinker, then don't worry. Don't sit there and panic about it. What you can do is take control of it. And by taking control of it, I mean understanding yourself. Look inwards and find out what you're overthinking about. Put yourself into those different scenarios and go, okay, well, I overthink about my relationship. Okay, why do you overthink about your relationship? Well, I don't feel comfortable, or I don't trust, or whatever it might be. Then try and build the trust. That's the first thing you have to do, is try and build the trust. So you would ultimately go to your partner and say, this is how I feel. And you'll get your mind put at rest, no doubt. That's an easy scenario to unpick. If you overthink text messages, then before you react, walk away. And I always talk about pushing away the negativity and holding on to the positivity. So, but if you do overthink any situation, find out why you overthink and try to undo the overthink process. If you can't undo it, and like me, emails and stuff like that, I can't stop emails. It's part of my job. I can't stop text messages. It's part of my life. It's part of everyone's life. But what I can do is control how I react. And that's the key part here, is controlling how I react. So if you're an overthinker, just try and control that act. Try and take control of what is making you overthink. And by doing that, you will then move forward. You'll progress. You'll understand yourself a bit better. And just keep adapting and reviewing. It's crazy, but we talk about this in the whole of everything I deal with on a daily basis. I deal with health and safety. So we talk about, and I won't bore you, the old plan, do, check, act. And it's all that cycle. And it's always about implementing something. So planning to do something, doing something, checking that something's working, and then reacting again or acting. And it's no difference to mental health. You can almost put that same scenario, as geeky as that sounds, into how you deal with mental health. So plan what your problem is. So we're talking about overthinking here. So plan why you overthink. Check, plan, do. So do the problem, actually implement it, get it in place and say, right, I'm going to take control about it. Check it. So that's a review of it. Do you need to review again? Are you grasping it enough? Or do you need to take control of it a bit more? Or are you taking control of it too much and just relax a little bit and then act on that new review? So and that is basically the principles of risk management. There's no difference to incorporating that into your mental health. Hence the reason why mental health and well-being is actually incorporated now into health and safety, because it's a similar trait. We have to do a similar thing. And that's probably why I find it so easy to talk about, is because I'm relating to it, the process that I have to go through on a daily basis. I have to incorporate that on my work. So it just combines. So it's really key that you manage that. So if you're an overthinker, then just follow that cycle and see if there's a way that you can grasp it. Stop the overthinking. Don't look at it as a negative, though. Like I said to you, there's a huge positive to an overthinker. You've already thought about every situation. Now, I overthink even just the basics. If I'm travelling somewhere and I'm going somewhere for the day, I need everything in line. I overthink the worst case scenario. Say, for instance, I'm going to the city for my job. Then I will overthink the train. What if the train breaks down? What if the train, it stops at a junction, doesn't go any further, and I have to get onto a bus to go to a different place? I think about all these things. When I get to there, do I have to go to the bus or the taxi? Where am I going to? I need to look on Google Maps. I overthink everything, and that alone is exhausting. And what you don't realise as an outsider looking at an overthinker is that is what's going through their brain 24/7. They are just a mash of craziness. Now, if you put yourself in that scenario for just 5 minutes, it will overwhelm you. We're used to it. I'm used to overthinking a lot of situations. But it doesn't make it easier. It just, if anything, makes me more inherent and more susceptible to stress, because I'm constantly living in a stress bubble. So I'm trying to control that. So if you're an overthinker, try to control it. Look at that same incorporation of what we do for risk management. As boring as that sounds, it works. Plan, do, check, act. There's no difference to that. It's a cycle. And in that cycle, you'll hopefully grasp your overthinking, find out what is making you overthink. I'm going to leave on a little bit of a positive story, because I got a positive note from my friend this morning, actually, and he's been a little bit of an inspiration for me of recently. One of my friends who I engaged with through mental health, we had similar. It was actually a bit of a funny story. I walked into his office one day and he had a sad lamp, and I said to him, "Oh, you got a sad lamp? What have you got one of them for?" And he said, "You know what it is?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a sad lamp, mate. You normally use for a vitamin D deficiency or mental health, and it helps you get the sun rays that we lack in the UK." And it got the ball rolling. Anyway, we built a friendship, and we've had a good friendship since, which has been over a year now. he fed me an amazing story. I say fed. He delivered me an amazing story this morning, and that was my man Billy. And he's been a bit of an inspiration for me in the sense that he's been trying new things, and I very much thrive on my surroundings. So if people are doing things around me, it spurs me on. And he's decided that he would initially got into fitness, and I was very fortunate. I had two of my friends get into fitness at a similar time. One was dieting as well, so it helped me to grasp. So I started running about 3 weeks ago. I say running in the loosest terms. It's 3 to 4K now, I think I've got it to. So I'm not breaking any marathons. I'm not a Mo Farah, as they say. But I am making changes to my own mental health by releasing those endorphins, by getting out there and doing the exercise, feeling good about myself, trying to control what the medication is doing, which is slowing down my metabolism. So I want to continue to try and get some of this weight off and feel comfortable about myself. But anyway, I digress massively. But he came to me with a story. And the story was he's just taken up diving. And he did his first diving course. Now, he'd done diving before, so this is a fairly easy story to talk about in the sense that he's done it before, so he didn't have to do the basics. But what he was a rescue diver, and he was just told to jump in the pool and crack on. And as he was swimming, he was the lead diver. As he was swimming, it's only in a pool, so but it's a deep pool. But it's similar scenario, similar situations. And anyway, the person behind him who was his, who was diving with him, his air valve or his I can't remember what they call it, but DV valve is what I think it's called. It detached and basically started flooding air into the pool, and he was losing his air. So he managed to put another one on, but of course, because he'd lost his air, he didn't have his buoyancy, but he had these weights on. So my friend Billy decided to kick into gear his training, and ultimately went over and released his air so he could rise to the surface, and he brought his friend to the surface. So very rewarding little story there for my friend, who was super proud this morning. He spoke to me and he was like, dude, I did this morning. And I was like, mate, you are absolutely getting a mention, because that's a proper little hero trait there, mate, to jump into your first dive in a long time, and you end up, pulling someone out of the water. So just goes to show that, his little inspiration makes me smile. I've got a smile on my face right now. But yeah, I'm surrounded by these people that are doing these good, positive things. And, I've got an amazing weekend planned. I've got my best friend coming over on Friday as well, which is going to be absolutely fantastic, because we get to talk. I'm helping him with a job interview, so it kind of coincides with a little bit of let's have a couple of gins afterwards. But yeah, so here I am, really. This is an introduction for my video and a carry on for my podcast. But ultimately, thank you very much for listening, of course. And I'm hoping you'll continue to join me on my journey. Like I said, I'm on podcasts on the one you're listening to on the podcast, which is on The Gentleman's Talk. I'm on TikTok on The Gentleman's Talk, and I'm on YouTube on the Gentleman's Talk. It's a lot of Gentleman's Talks there. But ultimately, one of those platforms you can jump on, and if you want to see the video of me, jump on YouTube and see the bearded wonder, as they say, straight from the circus. But thanks for listening, and I really look forward to the next video and podcast coming out later this week. So take care, everyone, and I'll speak to you soon.